You can't just up and leave, Marnie. Family is forever. Clara's voice echoed in the kitchen. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. After 25 years of marriage, I thought Jack and I had built a life together, but lately it felt like we were drifting apart. His mother, Clara, had always been a presence in our lives, but her constant interference was taking its toll. I'm not leaving, Clara, I said, my voice strained. I just need some space to breathe. Clara scoffed, her eyes narrowing. Space? What do you need space for? You have a husband who loves you and a family who needs you. What more could you want? I bit my tongue, knowing that arguing with her was futile. Clara had a way of twisting my words, making me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. I glanced at Jack, hoping for some support, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. I have a career, Clara, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I can't just drop everything every time you need something. Clara's face hardened. A career? What good is a career when your family is falling apart? I felt my blood boil. How dare she question my dedication to my family? I had worked hard to build a successful career, and I refused to feel guilty for it. My career is important to me, Clara, I said, my voice rising. And it's important to this family. Without my income, we wouldn't be able to afford the things we have. Clara's eyes flashed with anger. So that's what this is about? Money? You think you're better than us because you make more money than Jack? I shook my head, frustrated. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Jack finally spoke up, his voice quiet. Mom, please. Marnie works hard for this family. We should be grateful for everything she does. Clara sniffed, her eyes filling with tears. I just don't want to see this family fall apart. Is that so wrong? I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. I knew she meant well, but her constant meddling was suffocating. I needed to find a way to set boundaries without tearing our family apart. No one wants this family to fall apart, Clara, I said, my voice softening. But we need to find a way to make this work for everyone. That means respecting each other's needs and boundaries. Clara's shoulders slumped, and for a moment I thought she might actually listen. But then her eyes hardened again, and she turned to Jack. I hope you know what you're doing, son, she said, her voice cold. Because if you lose her, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. With that, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Jack and me alone in the heavy silence. I turned to him, my heart aching. Jack, we can't go on like this. Something has to change. He nodded, his eyes filled with sadness. I know, Marnie. I'm sorry. I'll talk to her, I promise. But even as he said the words, I knew they were empty. Jack had been promising to talk to his mother for years, but nothing ever changed. I was tired of waiting for him to stand up for me, for us. I looked around the kitchen, at the home we had built together. I loved this place, but lately it felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. I knew I needed to make a change, but the thought of leaving everything I had known for so long was terrifying. But as I looked at Jack, at the man I had once loved so deeply, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to speak my mind. I deserved better, and so did our marriage. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation to come. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew it was necessary. I just hoped that Jack would be willing to fight for us, to stand up to his mother and put our marriage first. Because if he couldn't do that, then I didn't know how much longer I could stay. What do you mean you emptied the savings again? I felt my blood run cold as I stared at Jack, disbelief etched on my face. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Mom needed help with some unexpected expenses. I couldn't just leave her hanging. I took a deep breath, trying to control my rising anger. Jack, we've talked about this. We can't keep bailing your mother out every time she has a financial hiccup. We have our own bills to pay, our own future to plan for. Jack's eyes flashed with defensiveness. She's my mother, Marnie. I can't just turn my back on her. And I'm your wife, I snapped, my voice rising. When are you going to start putting our needs first? He flinched at my words, but I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty. I was tired of always being the one to compromise, to sacrifice my own dreams and desires for the sake of his family. I'm trying, Marnie, he said, his voice strained. But you know how Mom can be. She's been through so much, and she needs our support. I scoffed, shaking my head. Support is one thing, but this is enabling. She's a grown woman. Jack, She needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, but it's not that simple. She's my mother, and I can't just abandon her. I felt my heart sink at his words. It was the same argument we'd been having for years, and nothing ever seemed to change. Jack was so wrapped up in his guilt and his sense of obligation to his mother that he couldn't see how much it was hurting our marriage. I'm not asking you to abandon her, I said, my voice softening. But we need to set some boundaries. We can't keep sacrificing our own financial stability for her sake. Jack nodded, but I could see the reluctance in his eyes. I'll talk to her, I promise. We'll figure something out. But even as he said the words, I knew they were empty promises. Jack had been saying he would talk to his mother for years, but nothing ever changed. She always found a way to manipulate him, to make him feel guilty for not doing enough. I sighed, feeling the weight of our situation pressing down on me. I loved Jack, but I was starting to wonder how much longer I could keep living like this. I deserved a partner who would put our marriage first, who would stand up for me and for our future together. As if reading my thoughts, Jack reached out and took my hand. I'm sorry, Marnie. I know I haven't been the best husband lately, but I promise things will get better. We'll work through this together. I wanted to believe him, but a part of me couldn't help but feel skeptical. We'd had this conversation so many times before, and nothing ever seemed to change. But I knew I couldn't give up on our marriage, not yet. I had to keep fighting for what I believed in, for the life I wanted for us. Okay, I said, squeezing his hand. But things have to change, Jack. We can't keep going on like this. He nodded, his eyes filled with determination. I know, and they will. I promise. As we sat there in the kitchen, the weight of our problems hanging heavy in the air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I wanted to believe that things would get better, that Jack would finally stand up to his mother and put our marriage first. But a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult road ahead. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenges to come. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to fight for my marriage, for the life I wanted for us. And if Jack couldn't see that, if he couldn't find a way to put me first, then I would have to find the strength to do what was best for myself, no matter how painful it might be. They're moving in here? Without asking? My voice cracked with disbelief as I stared at Jack, my heart pounding in my chest. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Mom and Dad need a place to stay. Their house needs some repairs, and I thought it would be nice to have them closer to us. I felt my blood boil. Nice for who, Jack? Did you even consider how this would affect me, affect our marriage? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know it's not ideal, but they're my parents, Marnie. I can't just turn them away. I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words crushing down on me. I had just returned from a business trip, exhausted and looking forward to some peace and quiet in my own home. Instead, I was greeted with the news that my in-laws were moving in, invading my space, and disrupting my life. This is my home too, Jack, I said, my voice trembling with anger and frustration. You can't just make these decisions without consulting me. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, the front door burst open, and Clara walked in, followed closely by Harold. Marnie, dear, you're back, Clara exclaimed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Isn't it wonderful that we'll all be living together now? I forced a smile, trying to hide my true feelings. It's certainly a surprise, Clara. I had no idea you were planning on moving in. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, it was all Jack's idea. He's such a good son, always looking out for his family. I glanced at Jack, seeing the guilt and discomfort written all over his face. He knew how much this would upset me, but he had gone ahead with it anyway, putting his parents' needs above our own. As Clara and Harold began to unpack their belongings, I felt my heart sink. This was supposed to be our home, our sanctuary. But now, it felt like a prison, with my in-laws watching my every move and judging my every decision. I tried to keep my composure, but as the days went by, the tension only grew. Clara openly disrespected my space, rearranging my belongings and criticizing my choices. Harold was no better, constantly demanding attention and expecting me to cater to his every need. I found myself retreating to my work, staying late at the office just to avoid going home. But even there, I couldn't escape the stress and anxiety that had taken over my life. One evening, as I sat at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen, my colleague Sarah walked in. "Marnie, are you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "You've been working late every night this week." I sighed, feeling the weight of my problems crushing down on me. "It's my in-laws," I confessed. "They've moved in with, and it's just been a nightmare." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "I understand. My mother-in-law lived with us for a year after my husband passed away. It was one of the most challenging times of my life." I felt a glimmer of hope at her words. "How did you get through it?" I asked, desperate for any advice or guidance. She smiled sadly. "I had to learn to set boundaries, to stand up for myself and my needs. It wasn't easy, but in the end, it was the only way to preserve my sanity and my sense of self." I nodded, feeling a newfound sense of determination. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, constantly walking on eggshells in my own home. I had to find a way to reclaim my autonomy, to stand up for myself and my marriage. As I drove home that night, I steeled myself for the confrontation that lay ahead. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight for my happiness, for the life I wanted for myself and for my marriage. And if Jack couldn't see that, if he couldn't find a way to put our needs first, then I would have to find the strength to do what was best for myself, no matter how painful it might be. "I can't live like this, Jack," I whispered, my hands trembling as I sat across from him at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, but the tension between us was deafening. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know it's been difficult, Marnie, but they're my parents. What do you want me to do?" I felt my frustration boiling over. "I want you to stand up for me, for us. Ever since they moved in, it's been one thing after another. My belongings are being moved around, my routines are disrupted, and your mother constantly undermines me." Jack's eyes flashed with defensiveness. "She's just trying to help, Marnie. She means well." I scoffed, shaking my head. "Means well? She's manipulating you, Jack. Can't you see that? She's always making snide comments about my job, my cooking, even the way I dress. It's like nothing I do is ever good enough for her." He looked down at his hands, avoiding my gaze. "I know she can be difficult, but she's been through a lot. We need to be patient with her." I felt my heart sink at his words. It was the same excuse he always used, the same way he always justified his mother's behavior. I was tired of being patient, tired of being the one who always had to compromise. "Patient?" I asked, my voice rising. "I've been patient for years, Jack. I've put up with her constant interference, her manipulation, her disrespect. But enough is enough. I can't keep living like a stranger in my own home." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "What are you saying, Marnie?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the words I knew I had to say. "I'm saying that if things don't change, if you don't start putting our marriage first, then I don't know how much longer I can do this." His eyes widened, and he reached across the table to take my hand. "Marnie, please, don't say that. I love you and I want to make this work." I pulled my hand away, feeling the weight of my decision pressing down on me. "Then prove it, Jack. Stand up to your mother. Set some boundaries. Show me that you value our marriage as much as I do." He nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I will, Marnie, I promise. Things will be different from now on." But even as he said the words, I couldn't help but feel a sense of doubt. How many times had he made similar promises in the past, only to fall back into the same old patterns? How many times had I allowed myself to hope, only to be disappointed once again? As the days turned into weeks, the tension in the house only grew. Clara's presence was suffocating, and Harold's constant demands were draining. I found myself dreading coming home each night, knowing that I would be met with another argument, another battle for control of my own life. I tried to talk to Jack, to make him see how much his parents' presence was affecting me, but he always found a way to defend them, to make excuses for their behavior. It was like he was blind to the damage they were causing, or worse, like he simply didn't care. One night, after a particularly heated argument, I found myself alone in our bedroom, tears streaming down my face. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, constantly walking on eggshells in my own home. I deserved better, and so did our marriage. As I sat there, my mind racing with thoughts of escape, of starting over, I heard a knock at the door. I wiped my eyes, taking a deep breath before opening it to find Jack standing there, his face etched with concern. "Marnie, I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft. "I know I haven't been the husband you need me to be, but I promise things will be different from now on. I'll talk to my parents, set some boundaries. I'll put our marriage first, no matter what." I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he meant what he said. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder if it was too little, too late, if the damage had already been done, and if our marriage was beyond repair. As I looked into his eyes, searching for the truth behind his words, I knew that I had a decision to make. I could either keep fighting for a marriage that seemed to be slipping away, or I could find the strength to walk away, to start over on my own terms. And as much as it pained me to admit it, I knew that the latter might be the only way to save myself, to reclaim the life I had lost. "It's either them or me, Jack." My ultimatum hung heavily in the air as I stared at my husband, my heart pounding in my chest. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. "What are you saying, Marnie?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the words I knew I had to say. "I'm saying that I can't keep living like this, Jack. Your parents have taken over our lives, and you've let them. You've chosen them over me time and time again, and I can't do it anymore." He shook his head, his voice pleading. "Marnie, please, they're my parents. I can't just turn my back on them." I felt my anger rising, hot tears stinging my eyes. "But you can turn your back on me? On our marriage? Jack, I've tried to be patient, I've tried to understand, but enough is enough. I deserve better than this." He reached for me, but I pulled away, my heart breaking with each step. "I love you, Marnie. Please don't do this." I looked at him, my voice barely above a whisper. "I love you too, Jack, but I love myself more. And right now, I need to do what's best for me." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, my heart heavy with the weight of my decision. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that I couldn't keep living a lie, pretending that everything was okay when it was far from it. As the days turned into weeks, I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the pain of my crumbling marriage. But even as I put on a brave face, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Jack was hiding something from me. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a stack of papers in his desk drawer that I realized just how deep his betrayal ran. There, in black and white, were his plans for Clara's long-term care, plans that he had made without my knowledge or consent, plans that would have drained our savings and left me with nothing. I felt my blood run cold as I stared at the papers, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. How could he do this to me? How could he make such a huge decision without even discussing it with me first? In that moment, I knew that I had to leave, that I had to get out before it was too late. I started making secret preparations, squirreling away money and looking for a new place to live. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was constantly being lied to and betrayed. One night, while Jack and his parents were out at dinner, I packed up my essentials and loaded them into my car. I left a note on the kitchen table, explaining that I was leaving and that I wanted a divorce. I knew it would be a shock to him, but I also knew that I had to do what was best for myself, no matter how painful it might be. As I drove away from the house that had once been my home, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that I would have to rebuild my life from scratch, but I also knew that I was strong enough to do it. I thought back to all the times I had compromised my own happiness for the sake of others, all the times I had put my own needs last. But not anymore. From now on, I was putting myself first, no matter what anyone else thought or said. As I merged onto the highway, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a sense of hope and possibility wash over me. I knew that I had made the right decision, that I was finally taking control of my own life. And even though I didn't know what the future held, I knew that I was ready to face it head-on, no matter what challenges lay ahead. "I'm done with this charade," I said, staring into Jack's stunned eyes as I stood in the doorway of our once shared home, a suitcase in hand. He shook his head in disbelief, his voice trembling. "Marnie, what are you doing? Where are you going?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the words I knew I had to say. "I'm leaving, Jack. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep living a life where I'm constantly disrespected and betrayed." His eyes widened, and he reached for me, but I stepped back, my resolve unwavering. "Marnie, please, we can work this out. We can talk about this." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Talk? Jack, we've been talking for years, and nothing has changed. You've chosen your parents over me time and time again, and I'm done being a second-class citizen in my own home." He looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "But Marnie, I love you. I never meant to hurt you." I felt a pang of sadness in my heart, but I knew I couldn't let it sway me. "I know you love me, Jack, but sometimes love isn't enough. I need a partner who respects me, who values my needs and desires, and I'm sorry, but you haven't been that partner for a long time." With that, I turned and walked out the door, my heart heavy but my head held high. I knew it wouldn't be easy, starting over at my age, but I also knew that I deserved better than the life I'd been living. As I drove away from the house that had once been my home, I thought back to all the secret preparations I had made over the past few weeks. I had found a small apartment across town, a place where I could start fresh and rebuild my life on my own terms. I had transferred my essential belongings there bit by bit, careful not to arouse suspicion from Jack or his parents. I knew that they would be shocked when they discovered I was gone, that they would likely try to convince me to come back. But I was resolute in my decision, knowing that I had to put my own well-being first for once in my life. As the days turned into weeks, I threw myself into my new life, focusing on my work and my own personal growth. I reconnected with old friends, started taking yoga classes, and even began volunteering at a local women's shelter. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living for myself, rather than for someone else's expectations. But even as I embraced my newfound freedom, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of my mind. I knew that Jack and his parents wouldn't let me go without a fight, that they would likely try to manipulate me into coming back. And sure enough, one evening as I was leaving work, I found Jack waiting for me in the parking lot, his face etched with desperation. "Marnie, please," he begged, his voice cracking with emotion. "Come home. We can fix this. I promise things will be different." I looked at him, my heart aching for the man I had once loved so deeply, but I knew that I couldn't go back, that I couldn't risk losing myself again in the toxic cycle of our marriage. "I'm sorry, Jack," I said, my voice steady and clear, "but I've made my decision. I need to do what's best for me, and that means moving on with my life." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. "But Marnie, we're married. We made a commitment to each other. You can't just walk away from that." I shook my head, a sad smile playing at the corners of my lips. "I'm not walking away from our commitment, Jack. I'm walking away from a situation that was slowly destroying me, and I hope that someday you'll understand that." With that, I turned and walked away, my heart heavy, but my spirit unbroken. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that I would face challenges and obstacles I had never encountered before. But I also knew that I was strong enough to face them head-on, to build a life that was truly my own. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that I had almost forgotten existed. "You've taken everything from us, Marnie," Clara snarled, her face contorted with anger as she stood on the doorstep of my new apartment, Jack hovering behind her. I felt my heart race, but I forced myself to remain calm, to stand my ground. "I haven't taken anything from you, Clara. I've simply taken back my own life." She scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Your life? What about our family? What about the promises you made to Jack, to all of us?" I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Promises? Clara, you've done nothing but undermine and manipulate me from the moment Jack and I got married. You've never respected me or my role in this family." Jack stepped forward, his face etched with desperation. "Marnie, please, we can work this out. Just come home with us, and we'll figure it all out." I looked at him, my heart aching for the man I had once loved so deeply. But I knew that I couldn't go back, that I couldn't risk losing myself again in the toxic cycle of our marriage. "I'm sorry, Jack," I said, my voice steady and clear. "But I'm not coming back. I've made my decision, and I'm standing by it." Clara's face twisted with rage, and she lunged forward, her finger pointing accusingly at me. You selfish, ungrateful woman. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By abandoning your family and running off to play house on your own?" I felt my anger rising, hot and fierce in my chest. "Everything you've done for me. Clara, all you've ever done is try to control me, to make me feel small and insignificant. You've never once treated me like an equal partner in this family." She scoffed, her eyes flashing with contempt. "Equal partner? Marnie, you're nothing but a gold digger who married my son for his money and then abandoned him when things got tough." I felt my jaw clench, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "How dare you?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I have never been after Jack's money. I married him because I loved him, because I wanted to build a life with him. But you've never been able to see that, have you? You've always seen me as a threat, as someone who is trying to take your place in Jack's life." Clara's face paled, and she took a step back, her eyes wide with shock. "That's not true," she said, her voice trembling. "I've only ever wanted what's best for my son, for our family." I shook my head, a sad smile playing at the corners of my lips. "No, Clara, you've only ever wanted what's best for yourself. You've used guilt and manipulation to keep Jack under your thumb, to make him choose you over me time and time again, and I'm done being a pawn in your games." Jack looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. "Marnie, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I know we can." I looked at him, my heart breaking for the man I had once loved so deeply, but I knew that I had to stand firm, that I had to protect myself and my own well-being. "I'm sorry, Jack," I said, my voice soft but resolute. "But I've made my decision. I need to do what's best for me, and that means moving on with my life. I hope that someday you'll understand that." With that, I turned and walked back into my apartment, closing the door firmly behind me. I leaned against it, my heart racing and my hands trembling. I knew that the confrontation had been necessary, that I had needed to stand up for myself and my own needs, but that didn't make it any easier, didn't erase the pain and heartbreak of leaving behind the life I had once known. As I stood there trying to catch my breath and calm my racing thoughts, I heard a soft knock at the door. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was Jack or Clara come to try and convince me to change my mind. But when I opened the door, I was surprised to see Elias standing there, a concerned look on his face. "Marnie, are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle and soothing. I heard shouting from the hallway. "Is everything all right?" I felt my eyes fill with tears, and I shook my head, my voice cracking with emotion. "No, Elias, everything is not all right. But it will be. I know it will be." He nodded, his eyes filled with understanding and compassion. "I'm here for you, Marnie. Whatever you need, I'm here." I smiled through my tears, feeling a sense of gratitude and warmth wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that I would face challenges and obstacles I had never encountered before. But I also knew that I wasn't alone, that I had people in my life who cared about me and supported me. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that I had almost forgotten existed. "For the first time in years, I feel free," I wrote in my diary, a smile playing at the corners of my lips as I sat in my cozy new apartment, the morning sun streaming through the windows. It had been 6 months since I had left Jack and his family, 6 months since I had taken the leap of faith and started over on my own terms. And while it hadn't been easy, I knew that I had made the right decision. In the weeks following my confrontation with Clara and Jack, I had thrown myself into my work, focusing on my career and my own personal growth. I had started taking yoga classes, joined a book club, and even begun volunteering at a local women's shelter. But perhaps the most rewarding thing I had done was start a support group for women who had gone through similar experiences to my own. Every week, we would meet at a local community center, sharing our stories and offering each other support and encouragement. As I sat there, listening to the other women talk about their own struggles and triumphs, I felt a sense of connection and purpose that I had never experienced before. I knew that I wasn't alone, that there were other women out there who had faced the same challenges and come out stronger on the other side. One evening, after a particularly emotional meeting, I found myself walking home with Sarah, my colleague and confidant. We had grown closer over the past few months, bonding over our shared experiences and our determination to build better lives for ourselves. "I'm so proud of you, Marnie," she said, her voice warm and sincere. "You've come so far in such a short time. I know it hasn't been easy, but you've handled everything with such grace and strength." I felt my eyes fill with tears, and I reached out to hug her, feeling a sense of gratitude and warmth wash over me. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you, without all of you." She smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well, I think there's one person in particular who's been a big help to you lately. A certain coworker with a charming smile and a kind heart." I felt my cheeks flush and I looked down at my feet, trying to hide my smile. "Elias has been a good friend," I said, my voice soft and shy. "But that's all it is, a friendship." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching with amusement. "Sure, Marnie, whatever you say." I laughed, feeling a sense of lightness and joy that I hadn't experienced in years. I knew that Sarah was right, that there was something special growing between Elias and me. But I also knew that I needed to take things slow, to focus on my own healing and growth before I could even think about starting a new relationship. As I walked into my apartment that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had come so far in such a short time, had faced my fears and taken control of my own life. And while I knew that there would still be challenges and obstacles ahead, I also knew that I was strong enough to face them head-on. I thought back to the life I had once known, to the years I had spent trapped in a toxic and unhealthy marriage. I thought of Jack and Clara, struggling to adjust to their new reality without me, living in a cluttered and chaotic house that they could barely maintain on their own. A part of me felt a twinge of sadness for them, knowing that they were facing the consequences of their own actions and choices. But I also knew that I couldn't dwell on the past, that I had to keep moving forward and building the life that I wanted for myself. As I sat down at my desk, ready to start a new day and a new chapter in my life, I couldn't help but smile. I knew that the road ahead would be long and winding, that there would be ups and downs and twists and turns. But I also knew that I was ready for whatever lay ahead, that I had the strength and the resilience to face anything that came my way. And for the first time in years, I felt truly happy, truly at peace with myself and my choices. I knew that I had made the right decision, that I had taken back my life and my freedom, and I knew that no matter what happened next, I would never let anyone take that away from me again. I smoothed my apron and took a deep breath, steeling myself for another Sunday dinner with Gloria. The aroma of roast chicken filled the kitchen, but my stomach churned with dread. "Emily, dear, are you sure you used enough seasoning?" Gloria's syrupy voice drifted in from the dining room. "The last time it was so bland." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind her that she'd praised that very same chicken recipe just last month. "I'm sure it'll be delicious, Gloria." I called back, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. Aaron appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "Need any help, honey?" I shook my head, offering a tight smile. "I've got it under control. Why don't you keep your mother company?" He hesitated, clearly sensing the tension. "You know, Mom means well. She just—" "Aaron!" Gloria's voice cut through our conversation like a knife. "Come tell me about that big project at work. Emily can manage in the kitchen, I'm sure." I watched my husband's shoulders slump as he turned away, leaving me alone with my simmering resentment. As I carried the platter to the dining room, I caught sight of my reflection in the hall mirror. At 35, I looked older than my years, worry lines etched around my eyes. "There she is!" Gloria beamed, her perfectly coiffed silver hair gleaming in the soft light. I was beginning to wonder if we'd eat before midnight. I set the platter down, forcing a laugh. "Oh, Gloria, you're such a kidder." Aaron cleared his throat. "It looks great, Em, doesn't it, Mom?" Gloria peered at the chicken, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Well, it certainly looks interesting. Did you try that new recipe I sent you?" "Actually, because I specifically remember telling you how much Aaron loves lemon and rosemary. Didn't I, darling?" Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, Emily's chicken is always delicious. Let's just enjoy the meal, okay?" I sat down, my hands shaking slightly as I reached for the serving spoon. The meal progressed with Gloria peppering Aaron with questions about work, barely acknowledging my presence except to make thinly veiled criticisms about the food or the state of the house. "You know, Emily," Gloria said, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin, "I was talking to my friend Marge the other day. Her daughter-in-law works full-time and still manages to keep a spotless home. I don't know how she does it." I gripped my fork tighter. "Well, It's probably because she doesn't have children yet," Gloria continued, her eyes boring into mine. "Speaking of which, when are you two planning on giving me some grandchildren? I'm not getting any younger, you know." The room fell silent. I looked to Aaron, silently pleading for support, but he stared down at his plate. "We're still discussing it," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria squeaked. "Well, don't wait too long. Tick-tock, dear." I abruptly stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me, I need some air." I fled to the back porch, gulping in the cool evening air. Tears pricked at my eyes as I leaned against the railing, wondering how much longer I could endure this weekly torment. The screen door creaked open behind me. Aaron's voice was soft, hesitant. I turned to face him, no longer able to hide my distress. "I can't do this anymore, Aaron. Your mother, she's—" I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "She can be a bit much, but she loves us in her own way." I shook my head, frustration bubbling up inside me. "Love? Is that what you call it? She criticizes everything I do, makes me feel worthless in my own home. And you just sit there and let it happen." Aaron's face fell. "That's not fair, Em. I'm trying to keep the peace. What do you want me to do? Choose between my wife and my mother?" The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Before I could respond, Gloria's voice rang out from inside. "Aaron? Emily? Where did you two run off to? The dishes won't do themselves, you know." I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my resolve crumble. When I opened them again, I saw the conflict etched on Aaron's face. In that moment, I realized that our marriage had become a battlefield, with Gloria as the opposing general. And I was losing the war. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, but its warmth did nothing to ease the chill that had settled between Aaron and me since last night's disastrous dinner. I mechanically flipped pancakes, my mind racing with unspoken words and simmering frustrations. Aaron shuffled into the kitchen, his tie askew. "Morning, Em," he mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. I turned to face him, spatula in hand. "We need to talk about last night." He sighed, shoulders slumping. "Can't we just forget about it? Mom didn't mean—" The doorbell's shrill ring cut him off. We exchanged puzzled glances before Aaron went to answer it. "Mom?" I heard him say, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing here so early?" My stomach dropped as Gloria's voice carried through the house. "Can't a mother visit her son without an interrogation?" "I brought breakfast." I gripped the counter, willing myself to stay calm as they entered the kitchen. Gloria breezed past me, setting a bakery box on the table. "Oh, Emily, dear, you didn't need to cook. I brought those croissants Aaron loves." She wrinkled her nose at my pancakes. "Though I suppose we could have both. Wouldn't want your efforts to go to waste." I plastered on a smile. "How thoughtful of you, Gloria." Aaron cleared his throat. "Mom, this is unexpected. Emily and I were just about to—" "Nonsense," Gloria interrupted, waving a manicured hand. "I have wonderful news that simply couldn't wait." She beamed at us both. "I've decided to move closer. I found the most darling little house just 3 blocks away. Won't that be lovely?" The spatula clattered to the floor. Aaron's face paled as he looked at me, then back to his mother. "Mom, that's quite a decision. Are you sure?" Gloria's eyes narrowed. "Of course I'm sure. Don't you want me nearby? Especially when you two finally decide to give me grandchildren." She turned to me, her gaze sharp. "Speaking of which, Emily, have you seen a doctor about your situation? At your age, fertility can be such a concern." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling as if the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. We. "Mom," Aaron interjected, his voice strained. "Emily and I haven't decided about children yet. It's a big decision." Gloria's laugh was like glass shattering. "Oh, Aaron, you're not getting any younger either, you know. And Emily, well—" She gave me a pitying look. "Tick-tock, dear." Something inside me snapped. "That's enough!" I shouted, surprising even myself. "I will not be bullied in my own home. Our family planning is none of your business, Gloria." The room fell silent. Aaron stared at me, wide-eyed, while Gloria's face flushed an angry red. "Well, I never," she huffed. "Aaron, are you going to let her speak to me like that?" I turned to my husband, silently pleading for support. He looked between us, conflict etched on his face. "Mom, Emily's right. We need some space to make these decisions on our own." Gloria's eyes filled with tears. "My own son, turning against me, after all I've sacrificed for you." She gathered her purse, heading for the door. "I suppose I'll just go home and die alone, shall I?" As the door slammed behind her, Aaron slumped into a chair. "God, Em, what are we going to do?" I sank down beside him, emotionally drained. "I don't know, Aaron, but something has to change. I can't live like this anymore." He reached for my hand, his touch hesitant. Maybe we should start trying. For a baby, I mean. It might make things easier with Mom." I jerked my hand away, stung. "Is that what you want? To have a child just to appease your mother?" Aaron's face crumpled. "No, I don't know what I want anymore." As I looked at my husband, the man I loved, but who seemed increasingly like a stranger, a cold realization washed over me. Our marriage was hanging by a thread, and Gloria's scissors were poised to snip it. "Aaron," I said softly, my heart breaking, "we need help. Real help. Or I don't think we're going to make it." His silence was deafening, and in that moment, I felt more alone than ever before. The weeks following Gloria's announcement of her impending move blurred together in a haze of tension and unspoken resentment. I found myself withdrawing, spending more time alone in our bedroom, away from Aaron's conflicted gaze and the constant reminders of our crumbling marriage. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines stared back at me, undeniable and life-altering. "Emily?" Aaron's voice called from the hallway. "Are you okay? You've been in there a while?" I opened the door, my face a mask of shock. "I'm pregnant," I whispered. Aaron's eyes widened, a mix of emotions flashing across his face. "Are you sure?" I nodded, holding up the test. "I've been feeling off for weeks. I thought it was just stress, but—" He reached for me, then hesitated. "This is... wow. I mean, it's what Mom wanted, right?" His words hit me like a slap. "What your mother wanted? Is that all you can think about?" Aaron backpedaled. "No, I didn't mean—" "Save it," I snapped, pushing past him. "I need some air." I grabbed my keys and stormed out, ignoring Aaron's calls behind me. The cool autumn air hit my face as I walked aimlessly through our neighborhood, my mind reeling. A baby. Our baby. The one thing that should have brought us closer was instead highlighting the chasm between us. Lost in thought, I didn't notice the familiar car pulling up beside me until I heard her voice. "Emily, what on earth are you doing out here alone?" I turned to see Gloria, her face a picture of exaggerated concern. "Just taking a walk," I muttered. She clucked her tongue. "Nonsense. Get in. I'll drive you home." Too exhausted to argue, I slid into the passenger seat. Gloria chatted away, filling me in on her moving plans and the latest neighborhood gossip. I stared out the window, my hand unconsciously resting on my still flat stomach. "Emily?" Gloria's voice cut through my reverie. "Are you even listening to me?" I turned to face her, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of my secret. "I'm pregnant," I blurted out. Gloria's car swerved slightly before she regained control. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant," I repeated, my voice stronger. "Aaron and I are having a baby." The car screeched to a halt as Gloria pulled over. She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and calculation. "Oh, Emily, this is wonderful news. I knew you two would come around eventually. Have you told Aaron yet? Oh, we must start planning immediately. I have so many ideas for the nursery. Of course, I'll need to be there every step of the way to guide you. First-time mothers need all the help they can get, you know." Her words washed over me in a suffocating wave. This moment, which should have been filled with joy and excitement, felt tainted by Gloria's presumptuous planning and barely concealed criticism. "Gloria," I interrupted, my voice shaking, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Aaron and I need to process this ourselves first. We'll make our own decisions about the baby." Her face hardened. "Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly need guidance. Why, when I was pregnant with Aaron—" "Stop!" I shouted, surprising us both. "This is not about you, Gloria. This is about me, Aaron, and our child, our family." Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Family? I am family, Emily. More so than you, it seems. Aaron will want me involved, you'll see. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. "Where are you? Mom's here, looking for you. She seems upset." I looked up to see we were parked in front of our house, Aaron standing on the porch with a confused expression. Gloria was already out of the car, striding towards him with purpose. "Aaron, darling," she called out. "Emily has the most wonderful news." I scrambled out of the car, my heart pounding. "Gloria, don't—" But it was too late. As I watched Gloria embrace Aaron, whispering in his ear, I saw the future I had imagined for us slipping away. Our joyous announcement, our private celebration, all stolen in an instant. Aaron's eyes met mine over Gloria's shoulder, a mix of confusion, joy, and something else I couldn't quite name. In that moment, I realized that my pregnancy wasn't just the beginning of a new life. It was the catalyst that would either save our marriage or destroy it completely. As my pregnancy progressed, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The joy of impending motherhood was constantly overshadowed by the growing distance between Aaron and me. Even more surprising was Gloria's sudden change in behavior. "Emily, dear, you simply must put your feet up," Gloria cooed, fluffing a pillow behind me. In my day, we knew the importance of rest for expectant mothers. I blinked in confusion, unused to this new, attentive version of my mother-in-law. "Thank you, Gloria. That's thoughtful of you." She beamed, patting my hand. "Anything for my grandbaby. Now, let me fetch you some herbal tea. It's excellent for morning sickness." As Gloria bustled off to the kitchen, I caught Aaron's eye. He shrugged, looking as bewildered as I felt. "I guess the baby news really changed things," he said, a hint of relief in his voice. I nodded, unsure how to feel about this unexpected turn of events. Part of me was grateful for the reprieve from Gloria's constant criticism, but another part remained wary, waiting for the other shoe to drop. As the weeks passed, Gloria's overbearing attentiveness began to grate on my nerves. She was constantly at our house, offering unsolicited advice and making plans for the baby's future. Meanwhile, Aaron grew increasingly distant, often working late and seeming distracted when he was home. One evening, as I sat alone in the nursery we'd begun to prepare, I heard Aaron's key in the lock. Glancing at the clock, I frowned. It was past 10 p.m., another late night at the office. Aaron called out softly. "You still up?" I waddled out to the hallway, one hand on my growing belly. "Hey," I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "Long day?" He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, big project. Sorry I missed dinner." "Again," I added, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. Aaron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I said I was sorry, Em. What more do you want?" "I want my husband back," I exploded, months of frustration boiling over. "I want the man who used to be excited about our baby, who used to talk to me, who used to—" I trailed off, choking back a sob. Aaron's face crumpled. "Em, I'm trying. It's just, there's a lot of pressure at work, and with Mom always around." "Don't blame this on your mother," I snapped. "She may be overbearing, but at least she's here. Where are you, Aaron? Because it sure doesn't feel like you're in this with me." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "I need some air," I muttered, grabbing my coat and keys. "Emily, wait." But I was already out the door, tears blurring my vision as I made my way to the car. I drove aimlessly, eventually finding myself at a small park near our house. Sitting on a bench, I watched young families playing, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness in my heart. My phone buzzed insistently. Thinking it was Aaron, I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was a text from an unknown number. "Your husband isn't working late. He's with her again. Lincoln Hotel, room 302. See for yourself." My blood ran cold. With trembling hands, I started the car and drove to the hotel, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. As I approached room 302, I heard muffled laughter. Aaron's laugh, followed by a woman's voice I didn't recognize. I stood frozen, my hand poised to knock, when suddenly the door swung open. Aaron stood there, his shirt untucked, lipstick on his collar. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of a young woman hastily buttoning her blouse. Our eyes met, and in that moment, my world shattered. "Emily," Aaron gasped, his face draining of color. "I can explain." But I was already running, one hand protectively cradling my belly, the other wiping away hot tears of betrayal. As I drove home in a daze, one thought crystallized in my mind. I had to protect myself and my baby, no matter the cost. The life I had known was over. Now, I had to figure out how to build a new one from the ashes of betrayal. The days following my discovery of Aaron's infidelity passed in a blur of numbness and disbelief. I wandered our house like a ghost, mechanically going through the motions of daily life while my mind raced with unanswered questions and suppressed rage. Aaron's desperate attempts to explain and apologize fell on deaf ears. I couldn't bear to look at him, let alone listen to his excuses. Gloria, sensing the tension but unaware of its cause, hovered anxiously, her newfound solicitousness now grating on my last nerve. One afternoon, as I sat in the nursery folding tiny onesies, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Riverside Cafe at 3 p.m. if you want to know the whole truth." My heart raced. Could this be the same person who had tipped me off about Aaron's affair? Despite my better judgment, I found myself driving to the cafe, curiosity and desperation overriding caution. As I entered, a young woman with sleek blonde hair waved me over. My stomach clenched as I recognized her from the hotel room. "Emily," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm Samantha. Thank you for coming." I sat down stiffly, my hands protectively cradling my belly. "Why did you want to meet?" Samantha sighed, pushing a folder across the table. "Because you deserve to know everything. Aaron's been lying to both of us." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were photos, receipts, and printed emails documenting Aaron's affair, not just with Samantha, but with multiple women over the past year. "He told me he was separated," Samantha explained, her eyes brimming with tears. "When I found out about you and the baby, I knew I had to come clean." I stared at the evidence, feeling as if the ground had opened up beneath me. How long have you known?" "A few weeks," she admitted. "I've been gathering evidence." "Emily, there's more you need to know. Aaron's been embezzling from his company to fund these affairs. He's in deep trouble, and I'm afraid he might try to pin it on me." My mind reeled. The Aaron I thought I knew, my loving, supportive husband, was a complete stranger. A liar, a cheater, and now a thief? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Samantha reached across the table, hesitating before placing her hand on mine. "Because I was wrong to get involved with a married man, and I want to make it right. You need to protect yourself and your baby, Emily." As I drove home, my emotions swung wildly between devastation and fury. How could Aaron do this to us? To our unborn child? And how had I been so blind? Entering our house, I found Aaron and Gloria in the living room, their hushed conversations stopping abruptly at my appearance. "Emily, honey?" Gloria cooed, her saccharine tone setting my teeth on edge. "Where have you been? We've been so worried." I ignored her, fixing my gaze on Aaron. "We need to talk. Now." Gloria started to protest, but Aaron cut her off. "Mom, please, give us some privacy." As soon as we were alone, I slammed the folder down on the coffee table. "Explain this," I hissed. Aaron's face drained of color as he flipped through the contents. I can explain." "Explain what?" I exploded. "How you've been cheating on me for a year, how you've been stealing from your company, how you've lied to me every single day." He reached for me, but I recoiled. "Emily, please. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can work this out." I laughed bitterly. "Work it out? There's nothing left to work out, Aaron. It's over." "You can't mean that," he pleaded. "Think about the baby. We're a family." The mention of our child ignited a fierce protectiveness within me. "That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Our baby deserves better than a lying, cheating father." Aaron's face hardened. "You can't take my child away from me. If you try to leave, I'll fight you for custody. Who do you think the courts will favor, a successful businessman or an unemployed housewife?" His threat hung in the air between us, and in that moment, I knew I had to be smarter than him. I couldn't let him know my next move. Forcing tears to my eyes, I softened my voice. "You're right. I'm just upset. We should talk about this when we're both calmer." Relief washed over Aaron's face. "Of course, Em. We'll figure this out together." As he pulled me into an embrace, my mind was already formulating a plan. I would play the forgiving wife, but in secret I would prepare for war. For the sake of my child, I would take down Aaron and Gloria, no matter the cost. The game had changed, and I was determined to win. The weeks following my discovery of Aaron's betrayal were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the forgiving wife to perfection, all while secretly preparing my escape. Every gentle touch from Aaron, every sympathetic glance from Gloria only fueled my determination to break free. As my pregnancy progressed, I focused on gathering evidence. Late at night, I combed through financial records, documented Aaron's absences, and built a case that would ensure my freedom and my child's future. The weight of my secret felt crushing at times, but the life growing inside me gave me strength. Then, during a routine checkup, my world shifted again. "Mrs. Thompson," the ultrasound technician said, her voice filled with excitement, "I have wonderful news. You're having twins." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Twins. 2 precious lives depending on me. As joy and terror warred within me, I realized the stakes had just doubled. Leaving the clinic in a daze, I nearly collided with Gloria, who was waiting in the parking lot. "Emily, dear, how was your appointment?" she chirped, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I hesitated, then made a split-second decision. "It's twins," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Gloria's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Twins? Oh, this is marvelous. Aaron will be overjoyed. We must start planning immediately. I'll call the country club, book the perfect baby shower venue, and of course, you'll need my help more than ever now. I'll just have to move in to assist with the babies." As Gloria rambled on, making plans for my future, our future, without a second thought to my input, something inside me snapped. The facade I'd carefully maintained for weeks crumbled. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria paused mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I said no," I repeated louder this time. "You won't be moving in, you won't be planning my baby shower, and you certainly won't be making decisions about my children's future." Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly can't handle twins on your own. Aaron and I—" "Aaron?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the man who's been cheating on me for the past year? The one who's been embezzling from his company to fund his affairs?" Gloria's face paled. "What are you talking about? That's preposterous." I pulled out my phone, showing her the evidence I'd gathered. "It's all true, Gloria. Your perfect son isn't so perfect after all." As Gloria sputtered and denied, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "I'm leaving him, Gloria. I'm taking my babies and starting a new life, far away from you and Aaron." Gloria's shock quickly turned to rage. "You ungrateful little tramp, after everything we've done for you, you'll never get away with this. We'll fight you for custody. You'll have nothing." Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I stood my ground. "Try it," I hissed. "I have enough evidence to bury Aaron. One word from me and his career, his reputation, everything will be destroyed." As I turned to leave, Gloria grabbed my arm. "You can't do this to us. To Aaron. He loves you." I wrenched my arm free. "Love, is that what you call lying, cheating, and stealing? No, Gloria, that's not love, and I won't let my children grow up thinking it is." Driving home, my emotions swung wildly between elation and despair. The knowledge that I was carrying twins, 2 precious lives depending on me, filled me with a fierce, protective love. But the reality of my situation, a failing marriage, a deceitful husband, and a vindictive mother-in-law, threatened to overwhelm me. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Aaron's car. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. I had to tell him about the twins, had to gauge his reaction. It would be the final test, the moment that would determine whether there was anything left to salvage or if I needed to accelerate my plans to leave. With trembling hands, I opened the front door, the weight of my future and my children's future heavy on my shoulders. Whatever happened next would change everything. There was no turning back now. The confrontation with Aaron about the twins had been the final straw. His initial joy quickly morphed into panic about finances and how this would affect his freedom. In that moment, I knew there was no future for us. With shaking hands, I packed a small bag and drove to my parents' house, tears blurring my vision the entire way. Mom opened the door, her smile fading as she took in my disheveled appearance. "Emily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I collapsed into her arms, sobs racking my body. Dad appeared behind her, his face etched with concern. They ushered me inside, and through broken sobs, I poured out the whole sordid tale. Aaron's affairs, the embezzlement, Gloria's manipulations, and finally the twins. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." Dad's face darkened with anger. "That son of a— I'll kill him." I shook my head vehemently. "No, Dad, I need to handle this myself, For the babies. They exchanged a worried glance before Mom asked, "What are you going to do?" Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. I'm going to divorce him, after the twins are born. The words hung heavy in the air. My parents, shocked into silence, simply held me as I cried. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. My parents rallied around me, helping me contact lawyers and make plans for the future. Aaron called incessantly, alternating between tearful apologies and angry threats. I let them all go to voicemail, focusing instead on my health and the babies growing inside me. As my due date approached, the stress began to take its toll. My blood pressure spiked and the doctor ordered bed rest. Confined to my childhood bedroom, I felt like a prisoner in my own body, my mind racing with worries about the future. One afternoon, as I lay trying to nap, I heard raised voices downstairs. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding as I recognized the voices. "How dare you show up here?" Dad's voice boomed. "After what you've done to our daughter." "Please, Mr. Johnson," Aaron pleaded. "I just want to talk to Emily, to make things right." "There's nothing to make right," Mom interjected, her usually gentle voice hard as steel. "You've done enough damage. Leave before we call the police." "You can't keep me from my children," Aaron shouted. "I have rights." I gripped the banister, my knees weak. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he thought he had rights? Suddenly, a sharp pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Another pain followed, more intense than the first. "Mom," I called out, my voice strained. "Dad." The arguing voices below fell silent. Then a flurry of footsteps on the stairs. "Emily?" Mom's worried face appeared. "Oh, God, are you in labor?" I nodded, unable to speak through the pain. Dad appeared behind her side, his face pale. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said, pulling out his phone. "No." Aaron's voice came from behind them. "I'll drive. It'll be faster." For a moment we all froze, the tension palpable. Then another contraction hit, and I cried out in pain. "Fine," Dad growled, "but I'm coming with you." The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Aaron kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of worry and guilt. Dad sat beside me in the back seat, holding my hand and murmuring words of encouragement. As we pulled up to the emergency entrance, a terrifying thought struck me. What if Aaron tried to take the babies? What if he and Gloria conspired to keep them from me? Panic seized me, making it hard to breathe. "Dad," I gasped. "Don't let him near the babies. Promise me." Dad's eyes met mine, understanding dawning in them. He nodded solemnly. "I promise, sweetheart. He won't get near them." As the nurses wheeled me into the delivery room, I caught one last glimpse of Aaron's face, a mixture of longing, regret, and something that looked almost like determination. In that moment, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The doors swung shut behind me, and I steeled myself for what was to come. My children's future hung in the balance, and I was determined to fight with everything I had to protect them, no matter the cost. 3 months after the twins' birth, I stood at the front door of what was once my home, my heart pounding. Dad waited in the car with the babies, ready to intervene if needed. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet as I made my way to the bedroom, filling a suitcase with my remaining belongings. As I reached for a photo album on the top shelf, a stack of papers tumbled down. Curious, I picked them up, my blood running cold as I realized what they were. More evidence of Aaron's affairs and financial misdeeds. "Emily?" Aaron's voice startled me. I spun around to see him and Gloria in the doorway, their faces a mix of surprise and anger. "What are you doing here?" Gloria demanded, her eyes narrowing as she spotted the suitcase. I straightened my spine, clutching the papers. "I'm getting my things. I'm leaving, Aaron, for good this time." Aaron's face darkened. "You can't take my children away from me. I won't let you." "Your children?" I laughed bitterly. "The ones you've barely seen since they were born? The ones you were ready to abandon when you found out I was having twins?" Gloria gasped, turning to Aaron. "What is she talking about?" I held up the papers. "Why don't you ask your perfect son about his affairs? Or about the money he's been embezzling from his company?" Aaron lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers, but I was quicker. "Emily, you don't understand. I can explain." "Explain what?" I shouted. Years of pent-up frustration pouring out. How you lied to me, cheated on me, made me feel worthless in my own home. Gloria's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "No," I cut her off. I'm done being silent, done being the perfect, obedient wife. I'm taking my children and starting a new life, away from your manipulation and Aaron's lies. Aaron's demeanor suddenly changed, his voice turning cold. If you walk out that door, I'll destroy you. I'll take the twins, ruin your reputation. You'll have nothing. For a moment, fear gripped me. Then I remembered the strength I'd found in myself, the love I had for my children. I stood taller, meeting his gaze. Try it, I said, my voice steady. I have enough evidence to bury you, Aaron. One word from me, and your career, your reputation, everything you care about, will be gone. Gloria stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. Now, Emily, let's not be hasty. We're family. We can work this out. I turned to her, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. Family? Is that what you call this? You've done nothing but undermine and belittle me from the day I married your son. Well, it ends now. I grabbed my suitcase, pushing past them towards the door. Aaron grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. You can't do this to me, he hissed. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I wrenched my arm free and slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the room, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Watch me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. As I walked out the front door, I heard Gloria wailing and Aaron calling my name. But I didn't look back. Dad was waiting, a proud smile on his face as he helped me into the car. Looking at my sleeping twins in the back seat, a wave of peace washed over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years I felt truly free. Ready to go home? Dad asked gently. I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. More than ready. As we drove away, I caught a final glimpse of Aaron and Gloria in the rearview mirror, standing shell-shocked on the front porch. The sight that once would have filled me with dread now only strengthened my resolve. I had survived their manipulation, their lies, and their attempts to break me. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to create a beautiful life for myself and my children. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a fighter, and a mother who would move mountains for her children. As we turned the corner, leaving my old life behind, I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. After all, I had fought the hardest battle of my life and won. Whatever challenges came next, I knew I had the strength to overcome them. The road stretched out before us, full of promise and possibility. And for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see where it would lead.
I never expected to find my life unraveling over a forgotten jacket. There I was, standing in the bedroom, about to head out for one of the most important presentations of my career. I was an urban planner, and today was the day I was pitching my proposal for a new eco-friendly district in the city. But instead of focusing on my notes, I found myself holding Jamie's jacket, the one he'd tossed carelessly on the bed the night before. I'm Harper, by the way. 32, married to Jamie for 5 years, and until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. But as I reached into the jacket pocket, my fingers brushed against something unexpected. A phone. Not his usual one, mind you. This was a cheap burner phone. My heart skipped a beat as I unlocked it with a simple swipe. There were messages, all from one contact, labeled only with a heart emoji. The first message was innocuous enough. Just a simple goodnight, love. But as I scrolled further, the words became more intimate, more damning. My stomach twisted as I read the last message, sent just last night. I can't wait to see you again, Celeste. Celeste. My sister. The name hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and swaying on my feet. I could barely process the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it. Jamie, my husband, and Celeste, the sister who'd always craved the spotlight, now secretly entwined in a way I couldn't even begin to fathom. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone clutched tightly in my hand. I should have been angry, furious even, but all I felt was a cold numbness spreading through my chest. I knew I had to confront him, but not now, not with the presentation looming. I needed to focus, needed to put this aside, at least temporarily. Jamie walked in, his usual charming smile plastered across his face. Hey, you ready for today? I forced a smile, tucking the phone back into his jacket pocket. Yeah, just about. You. Of course. I'll be cheering you on from the sidelines, he said, leaning in for a quick peck on the cheek. I turned slightly, letting him kiss the air instead. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he chose not to. As I left the house, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How long had this been going on? Why Celeste, of all people? The questions buzzed around my head like angry bees, and I had no answers. The presentation went by in a blur. I delivered my pitch, answered questions, and shook hands, all while feeling like I was watching someone else do it. My body moved on autopilot, my mind trapped in a loop of disbelief and betrayal. Later, back home, I waited for Jamie to return. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I would say, how I would confront him. But when he finally walked through the door, all my carefully planned words scattered like leaves in the wind. "Harper, you okay?" "You seem off," he said, concern lacing his voice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I found something today. In your jacket." His face paled slightly, a flicker of panic crossing his features. "What do you mean?" I held up the burner phone, watching as his eyes widened. "This." "Care to explain?" Jamie opened his mouth, but no words came out. It was all the confirmation I needed. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. "I don't know what to say," he finally murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Try telling the truth," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked at me, a mixture of guilt and something else, maybe regret, shadowing his eyes. "It just happened, Harper. I didn't mean for it to." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "It just happened. With my sister." The room fell silent again, the weight of his betrayal hanging between us like a storm cloud. I turned away, unable to look at him any longer. This was only the beginning, I realized. The beginning of something I hadn't planned for, hadn't wanted. But it was here, and I had to face it. As I stood there, my mind racing, I knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The next morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The events of the previous day felt like a bad dream, one I couldn't quite shake off. Jamie had left early for work, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing sense of betrayal that gnawed at my insides. I decided it was time to face the music and call a family meeting. If there was one thing I'd learned from years of navigating the complexities of urban planning, it was that problems rarely solve themselves. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I called Theo first, knowing he'd be the easiest to convince. "Hey, can you come over later? We need to talk about something important." Theo didn't hesitate. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'll explain when you get here." Lucas took a little more persuasion. "I've got a shift at the clinic," he said, sounding distracted. "Please, Lucas. It's important." There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. "All right. I'll be there." Finally, I called my parents. Evelyn answered, her voice warm and welcoming. "Harper, darling. How's my favorite daughter?" I winced at the unintended sting of her words. "Can you and Dad come by this afternoon? I need to talk to everyone." "Of course, dear. Is this about that big project of yours?" "No," I replied, my voice tight. "It's personal." The hours dragged on until they arrived. Evelyn and Walter settled on the couch, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Theo and Lucas sat across from them, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. I stood in front of them, feeling like I was about to present a case in court. "Thanks for coming," I began, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. "There's something I need to tell you all." Evelyn leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What is it, Harper?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Jamie is having an affair. With Celeste." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Walter shifted uncomfortably, while Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Theo was the first to speak. "Are you sure, Harper?" I nodded, feeling the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill. I found a phone, messages between them. "It's true." Lucas looked at me, his eyes filled with empathy. "I'm so sorry, Harper. I can't believe she would do this to you." Evelyn shook her head, disbelief etched on her face. "There must be some misunderstanding." "Celeste wouldn't." "There's no misunderstanding." I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. "She did this. And Jamie, He didn't deny it. Walter sighed, rubbing his temples. This is complicated. Complicated. I echoed, incredulous. It's betrayal, plain and simple. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes pleading. Harper, you know how Celeste can be. Maybe she didn't mean to. Didn't mean to? I interrupted, my frustration boiling over. This isn't an accident, Mom. She's been seeing my husband behind my back. The room fell silent again, the tension thick and palpable. I could see the gears turning in their minds, trying to process the mess we found ourselves in. Theo cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. What do you want to do, Harper? I don't know yet, I admitted, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. But I can't just ignore this. As the conversation continued, I noticed Evelyn and Walter exchanging glances. Their expressions a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. It was then that I realized the depth of the fracture in our family, the unspoken favoritism that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. Before we could delve deeper, the door swung open, and Celeste walked in, her usual confident stride faltering as she took in the scene. What's going on? I turned to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. We know, Celeste. About you and Jamie. She blinked, momentarily speechless, before her face hardened into a mask of defiance. So what if you do? The audacity of her response took my breath away. I watched as her eyes flicked to our parents, seeking some form of support or validation. Evelyn looked away, while Walter's expression remained unreadable. You can't just waltz in here and act like nothing happened, Theo said, his voice firm. Celeste crossed her arms, her posture defensive. I didn't plan this, Harper. It just happened. I shook my head, the anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. You've always wanted what I have, Celeste. But this is too much. The room fell into silence once more, the weight of the situation settling heavily over us all. As I stood there, facing my sister, I realized that this was only the beginning of a long and painful journey, but I was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. The tension in the room was palpable, hanging heavy like a thick fog that refused to lift. I stood there, facing Celeste, my pulse a steady drumbeat in my ears. Her defiance was a slap in the face, but what came next shattered whatever fragile hope I had left for our relationship. I'm pregnant, Celeste announced, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. The words hit me like a freight train, leaving me breathless and reeling. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling despite my efforts to keep them steady. I glanced around the room, taking in the shock mirrored in my brother's eyes, the disbelief etched on our parents' faces. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Celeste, are you sure? Celeste nodded, her expression unreadable. I'm sure. Walter shifted in his seat, his voice a low rumble. And Jamie is the father? Celeste hesitated, then nodded again. Yes. I struggled to process the revelation, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts and none at all. This was beyond betrayal. It was a complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew. I felt the room closing in around me, the walls pressing in as I fought to breathe. Theo broke the silence, his voice steady but tinged with anger. How could you do this, Celeste? To Harper, of all people. Celeste's eyes flashed, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her bravado. I didn't plan this, Theo. It just happened. Lucas shook his head, disappointment heavy in his voice. That's not an excuse, Celeste. You've hurt Harper more than you can imagine. I stood there, absorbing their words, my heart aching with a pain I couldn't describe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at the unfairness of it all. But instead, I just stood there, numb and silent. Evelyn turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and something else, perhaps a plea for understanding. Harper, I know this is hard, but maybe we can find a way to work through this as a family. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the room. A family? I repeated, incredulous. This isn't a family, Mom. It's a mess. Walter cleared his throat, his expression stern. We need to think about what's best for everyone involved. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. Everyone involved? What about me? What about what's best for me? The room fell silent again, the weight of the situation pressing down on all of us. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to keep my head above water in a sea of betrayal and broken promises. I need some air, I muttered, turning on my heel and heading for the door. I didn't wait for a response, didn't care to hear whatever platitudes they might offer. I just needed to get out, to escape the suffocating confines of the room and the reality I found myself trapped in. Outside, the cool air hit my face, a welcome reprieve from the chaos inside. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging within me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the sense of loss that threatened to overwhelm me. As I stood there, staring out into the distance, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my heart sinking as I saw Jamie's name flash across the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, before finally answering. "Harper," he began, his voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "What do you want, Jamie?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of warmth. "I heard from Celeste," he said, his words careful and measured. "I'm sorry." "Sorry," I repeated, my anger flaring. "You think sorry is enough?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "I know it's not, but I want to make things right." I laughed again, the sound harsh and unforgiving. "Make things right? You've got a funny way of showing it." "Please, Harper," he pleaded. "Can we just talk?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "I don't know, Jamie. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." The line went silent, the weight of my words hanging between us. I ended the call, slipping the phone back into my pocket as I turned away from the house, the life I'd once known slipping further from my grasp. As I walked away, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey toward healing and understanding, toward finding my own path amid the wreckage of what had been. And though I didn't know where it would lead, I was determined to find out. The decision to leave Jamie was both the hardest and easiest choice I'd ever made. Hard because of the love that once existed, easy because of the betrayal that had shattered it. That evening, I packed a suitcase with essentials, leaving behind the life we'd built together. As I zipped the bag, I felt a strange mix of freedom and fear. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on my shoulders, but it was a burden I was willing to bear. I found refuge at Theo's place, his apartment a sanctuary from the chaos that had become my life. He welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked, offering the kind of unconditional support I desperately needed. "Stay as long as you need," Theo said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Thanks, Theo. I don't know what I'd do without you," I replied, trying to muster a smile. We sat in silence for a while, the television murmuring softly in the background. I could feel his eyes on me, a silent offer of support, but I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not yet. The next day, I threw myself into work, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of urban planning. My team was preparing for a major presentation, and the pressure was a welcome distraction from my personal turmoil. As I buried myself in blueprints and zoning laws, I felt a sense of control returning, a lifeline amid the storm. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was late afternoon when Mason Reed, a colleague and friend, found me hunched over my desk, surrounded by papers and half-empty coffee cups. "Hey, Harper," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You've been at it for hours. Want to grab a bite?" I hesitated, the idea of stepping away from work daunting, but Mason's easy smile and genuine concern were hard to resist. "Yeah, sure. I could use a break." We ended up at a small cafe around the corner, the kind with mismatched chairs and a menu scribbled on a chalkboard. We talked about work, the upcoming project, anything but the elephant in the room. But Mason, perceptive as ever, didn't let it slide for long. "You seem different, Harper." "Everything all right?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing. I sighed, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "It's been a rough few days." Mason nodded, waiting for me to continue. His patience was a balm, giving me space to find the words. "Jamie and Celeste," I finally said, the names tasting bitter on my tongue. "It's a mess." He didn't push for details, just nodded in understanding. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." "Thanks, Mason." "I appreciate it," I replied, grateful for his presence. As we left the cafe, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days, hope. Maybe it was the warmth of a friend's support, or the realization that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Whatever it was, it gave me the strength to face what came next. Back at Theo's, I found a message waiting for me. It was from Evelyn, asking me to meet her and Walter at their house. The request was unusual, given our recent conversations, and it set my nerves on edge. But curiosity, and perhaps a lingering sense of duty, compelled me to go. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Evelyn and Walter sat across from me, their expressions a mix of concern and something else I couldn't quite place. "We've been thinking about everything," Evelyn began, her voice careful. "And we want to help." I raised an eyebrow, skepticism coloring my response. "Help? How?" Walter cleared his throat, a sign he was about to say something significant. "We've decided to support Celeste and Jamie financially." The words hung in the air, each syllable a blow to my fragile resolve. I stared at them, disbelief and betrayal warring within me. "You're what?" Evelyn reached for my hand, her touch both familiar and foreign. "We know this is hard, Harper, but they need us." I pulled my hand away, anger flaring. "And what about me? Do I not need support?" Walter sighed, his expression weary. "You're strong, Harper. You've always been strong." The implication was clear, and it stung more than I cared to admit. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't believe this. You're choosing them over me." "It's not about choosing," Evelyn insisted, her voice pleading. But it was. It always had been. I turned away, my heart heavy with the weight of their decision. As I walked out, I realized that my understanding of family, loyalty, and justice was shifting. The lines were blurring, and I was left to navigate the murky waters on my own terms. The days following my parents' decision to support Celeste and Jamie were a blur of anger and disbelief. I poured myself into work, seeking refuge in the meticulous details of urban planning. It was the only thing that made sense, the only place where I felt in control. One afternoon, as I was sketching out a new layout for a community park, my phone buzzed with a message from Lucas. "Hey, can we meet?" "I think we need to talk." I agreed, and we met at a small park near his clinic. The air was crisp, the sun casting long shadows as it dipped toward the horizon. Lucas was already there, sitting on a bench, his face thoughtful as he watched a group of children play nearby. "Thanks for coming," he said as I approached. "Of course. What's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about everything, and I think you should know something." The seriousness in his voice set me on edge. "What is it, Lucas?" He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Celeste isn't just pregnant. She's been struggling financially for a while now. Jamie's been helping her out, which is why they got close." I blinked, processing the information. "So this wasn't just about an affair?" Lucas shook his head. "No, it seems like it started as them trying to figure things out. But then it escalated." The revelation added another layer to the tangled web of betrayal. It didn't excuse their actions, but it complicated my feelings. I felt a pang of guilt, wondering if I'd been too focused on my own hurt to see the bigger picture. Why didn't they just ask for help? I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. Pride, maybe. Or shame. "I don't know, Harper," Lucas replied, his expression pained. "But I thought you should know." I nodded, gratitude and confusion swirling within me. "Thanks, Lucas. I appreciate you telling me." As we sat there in silence, I realized that my understanding of justice was shifting. It wasn't just about retribution for the wrongs done to me. It was about understanding the complexities of human motivations and the gray areas that often went unnoticed. Later that evening, I found myself at a crossroads. Mason had invited me to a gallery opening, a chance to step away from the chaos and enjoy something beautiful. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to let someone new into my life, even as a friend. But Mason's quiet persistence was hard to resist, and I agreed to go. The gallery was bustling with people, the walls adorned with vibrant paintings that seemed to pulse with life. Mason greeted me with a warm smile, his presence a calming balm against the backdrop of my turbulent thoughts. As we wandered through the exhibits, Mason's easy conversation and genuine interest in the art helped me relax. I found myself laughing at his dry humor, the tension in my shoulders easing for the first time in days. We stopped in front of a particularly striking piece, a swirling mass of colors that seemed to capture the chaos and beauty of life. Mason turned to me, his expression thoughtful. You know, art is a lot like life. It's messy, unpredictable, but sometimes you find something beautiful in the chaos. His words resonated with me, echoing the thoughts I'd been grappling with. I think you're right, I replied, my voice softer than I intended. As the evening wore on, I realized that I didn't have to face everything alone. Mason's presence, though new, was a reminder that there were people who cared, who were willing to stand by me as I navigated the murky waters of my life. But just as I began to feel a semblance of peace, my phone buzzed with a message from Theo. Emergency family meeting. You need to come. My heart sank, the fragile calm I'd found shattering as I excused myself and headed to Theo's apartment. The atmosphere was tense when I arrived, everyone gathered with expressions of concern and urgency. What's going on? I asked, my voice edged with worry. Theo exchanged a glance with Lucas before speaking. Mom and Dad have decided to mortgage their house to help Celeste and Jamie. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, the implications crashing over me like a tidal wave. They what? They think it's the only way to keep everyone afloat, Lucas added, his tone apologetic. I felt the room spin, the ground shifting beneath my feet. This was more than just a betrayal. It was a complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew about family and loyalty. As I stood there, grappling with the enormity of the situation, I realized that my journey was far from over. I would have to dig deeper, find strength I didn't know I had, and redefine what justice and family truly meant to me. The weight of my parents' decision to mortgage their home settled over me like a thick, suffocating fog. Each breath felt heavy, each thought tangled in a web of betrayal and disbelief. I sat alone in Theo's living room, the silence pressing in around me, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. Theo and Lucas had tried to offer comfort, their words of support like lifelines tossed into the stormy sea I found myself adrift in. But their reassurances, though well-intentioned, felt hollow against the enormity of what I faced. My family, the very foundation of my life, had chosen a path that left me isolated and questioning everything I thought I knew. The next day, as I walked into work, I felt a strange detachment from the world around me. My colleagues greeted me with their usual smiles, but I could barely muster a response. I was a ghost, moving through the motions of my life, haunted by the betrayal that had upended everything. Mason found me at my desk, his concern evident in the way he lingered in the doorway. "Harper, can we talk?" I nodded, though my heart wasn't in it. We walked to a nearby cafe, the familiar setting a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. "Is everything okay?" Mason asked, his voice gentle but probing. I hesitated, unsure of how to put my feelings into words. "It's just, everything's a mess, Mason." He nodded, his understanding palpable. "I'm here if you need anything. You don't have to go through this alone." His offer was genuine, and I felt a flicker of gratitude amid the despair. But even Mason's kindness couldn't erase the reality of my situation. My family was crumbling, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. As we left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from Jamie. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." I felt a surge of anger, the audacity of his request igniting the simmering resentment within me. But curiosity and perhaps a lingering sense of unfinished business compelled me to agree. We met at a park, the setting eerily reminiscent of happier times. Jamie stood by a bench, his expression a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. "Thanks for coming," he began, his voice tentative. "What do you want, Jamie?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know I've messed up, but I want to make things right." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the still air. "Make things right? You've done nothing but make things worse." He flinched, the truth of my words hitting home. "I know, but I'm trying to fix it." "Fix it?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've destroyed everything, Jamie. There's no fixing this." His shoulders sagged, defeat etched into his features. "I'm sorry, Harper. I really am." The sincerity in his voice was unexpected, but it did little to soothe the raw wound of betrayal. Sorry doesn't change anything. We stood there in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. I felt a pang of sadness for what we'd lost, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of our situation. As I turned to leave, Jamie's next words stopped me cold. Celeste is considering giving up the baby. I froze, the implications of his statement crashing over me like a tidal wave. What? She's overwhelmed, Harper. She doesn't know what to do, he explained, his voice filled with a mix of desperation and regret. The revelation added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web. It was a twist I hadn't anticipated, one that made the situation feel even more hopeless. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the fragile foundation of my life crumbling further. Back at Theo's, I sat in the darkened living room, the enormity of everything pressing down on me. My family was fractured, my marriage in ruins, and now this new complication threatened to unravel what little resolve I had left. As I sat there, the themes of revenge and justice that had driven me began to blur, their edges softened by the harsh realities of life. I realized that I was at a crossroads, faced with a choice that would define not only my future but the future of those around me. In that moment of darkness, I understood that true strength lay not in seeking revenge, but in finding a way to move forward, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. It was a daunting task, but one I was determined to face head-on, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension as I stood on the threshold of my parents' home, preparing for what I knew would be a pivotal confrontation. The weight of their choices, the betrayal, and the tangled web of emotions had led us to this moment. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead, and pushed open the door. Inside, the atmosphere was charged, a storm of unspoken words and unresolved conflicts. Celeste sat on the couch, her expression a mix of defiance and vulnerability. Jamie stood nearby, his posture tense, while Evelyn and Walter hovered uncertainly, caught between their daughters. "Thank you for coming, Harper," Evelyn began, her voice a strained attempt at warmth. I nodded curtly, my gaze fixed on Celeste. "We need to talk." Celeste met my eyes, her bravado faltering. "I know." Jamie shifted uncomfortably, his presence a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. "We all need to talk," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a seat, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "You're considering giving up the baby," I stated, my words more accusation than question. Celeste flinched, her facade cracking. "I don't know what else to do, Harper. Everything's falling apart." I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger and hurt that had defined the past weeks. "You made choices, Celeste. Choices that affected all of us." "I know," she admitted, her voice small. "But I didn't mean for it to get this far." Jamie stepped forward, his expression earnest. "We're trying to fix things, Harper." "We really are." I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Fix things? You've done nothing but make them worse." Evelyn interjected, her tone pleading. "Harper, please. We need to find a way forward." I turned to her, the weight of their decision to mortgage the house pressing heavily on my mind. "And what about you? You're risking everything for them." Walter sighed, his voice weary. "We're trying to help, Harper. It's what families do." "Is it?" I challenged, my voice rising. "Because it feels like you're choosing them over me." The room fell silent, the truth of my words hanging in the air. I could see the conflict in their eyes, the struggle to reconcile their actions with the consequences. As the tension reached a breaking point, an unexpected voice cut through the silence. Mason had arrived, his presence a steadying force amid the chaos. "Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way," he suggested, his tone calm but firm. I turned to him, surprised by his intervention. "What do you mean?" Mason stepped forward, addressing the room. "This isn't just about who did what. It's about what happens next. You all have a chance to make things right, but it starts with honesty." His words resonated, a beacon of clarity in the storm. I realized that revenge and justice weren't the only paths forward. There was room for understanding, for finding a way to rebuild. Celeste looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. "I'm sorry, Harper." "Truly." I nodded, the anger that had fueled me beginning to ebb. "I know." Jamie spoke up, his voice steady. "We want to do better. for the baby, for all of us. I took a deep breath, the enormity of their words settling over me. This was the moment, the chance to redefine what family meant, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. I can't promise anything, I said, my voice firm but open. But I'm willing to try. The relief in the room was palpable, a collective exhale that signaled the beginning of a new chapter. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but it was a start. As we sat together, discussing the future and the steps we needed to take, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in weeks. The themes of revenge and justice had evolved, giving way to understanding and the possibility of redemption. Mason's presence was a steady reminder that I wasn't alone, that there were people willing to stand by me as I navigated the complexities of life. As the conversation continued, I realized that the journey was far from over, but I was ready to face it with courage and hope. The days following the confrontation at my parents' house felt like a slow exhale after holding my breath for too long. The air was clearer, the path ahead not entirely free of obstacles, but at least visible. I found myself back at work, the steady rhythm of urban planning offering a welcome sense of normalcy. My projects, once a refuge, were now a testament to my resilience and growth. Mason and I had found a comfortable rhythm, his presence a steadying force in my life. We spent evenings exploring the city, discovering hidden gems and quiet corners that allowed us to talk and connect. Our conversations were easy, filled with laughter and understanding, a balm for the wounds that still lingered. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Mason turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "You've come a long way, Harper." I nodded, the truth of his words settling over me. "It hasn't been easy, but I think I'm finally finding my way." He smiled, a warm, reassuring presence. "You're stronger than you know." His words were a reminder of the journey I'd undertaken, the challenges I'd faced and overcome. I realized that my understanding of family, loyalty, and justice had evolved, shaped by the trials and tribulations of the past months. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of gold and pink, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The chaos that had once defined my life was giving way to something new, something hopeful. A few days later, I received a letter from my parents. The envelope was simple, unassuming, but the contents held the weight of 1,000 conversations left unsaid. Inside, a handwritten note from Evelyn and Walter expressed their regret, their desire to rebuild our relationship on new terms. "We've made mistakes, Harper. We see that now. We want to make things right if you'll let us," the letter read. I sat with their words, the sincerity and vulnerability evident in each line. It was an olive branch, a chance to redefine what family meant, not just for me, but for all of us. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that trust would take time to rebuild, but the possibility of healing was a powerful motivator. As I pondered their offer, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take shape. The themes of revenge and justice that had once driven me were now tempered by understanding and compassion. I realized that true strength lay not in holding on to past grievances, but in finding a way to move forward, to build something new from the remnants of what had been. In the weeks that followed, I reached out to Celeste and Jamie, tentative steps toward reconciliation. Our conversations were cautious, filled with the weight of our shared history, but there was a willingness to listen, to understand. Celeste had started therapy, a step toward healing that spoke of her desire to change. One afternoon, as I sat with Theo and Lucas, the sun streaming through the windows, I felt a sense of gratitude for the support they'd offered throughout my journey. Their unwavering presence had been a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. "You've been amazing, you know that?" I said, my voice filled with warmth. Theo shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. "We're family, Harper. That's what we do." Lucas nodded, his eyes reflecting the same sentiment. "We're proud of you. For everything." Their words were a balm, soothing the lingering ache of past wounds. I realized that family wasn't just about blood, but about the connections we choose, the people who stand by us when the world feels like it's falling apart. As the story of my life continued to unfold, I knew that the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty, but I was ready to face them with courage and hope. The resolution wasn't perfect, Nor was it complete. There were still questions, lingering uncertainties that would take time to unravel. But the foundation was there, a new beginning built on the lessons of the past, the promise of a future defined by love, understanding, and the strength to move forward. In the end, I realized that the true measure of justice wasn't in retribution, but in the ability to forgive, to find peace amid the chaos, and to embrace the possibility of redemption and growth. It was a journey I was proud to have undertaken, one that had taught me the true meaning of resilience and the power of family.
The day was overcast, the kind of gloomy weather that seemed fitting for a funeral. As I stood there, surrounded by mourners, I couldn't help but reflect on the life of Charles, my father-in-law. He had been a kind man, a pillar in the community, and his absence left a void that was palpable in the air. I glanced over at Michael, my husband, standing rigid as the chief mourner. His face, usually unreadable, today seemed like an emotionless mask. I wondered, not for the first time, what thoughts were hiding behind that facade. The funeral procession was a grand affair, much like Charles himself. He was a man who had touched many lives, and it showed in the number of people who had come to pay their respects. As I listened to the eulogies, a mix of sorrow and admiration filled the air. Charles had been not just a family man, but a mentor, a friend to many. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Michael leaned in and said, almost too casually, "I hope to be sent off like this too, surrounded by family and many acquaintances. Laura, I'll pick out some BGM, so count on you to handle it." His words struck me as odd, given the solemnity of the moment. It was typical of Michael to think about himself even in the face of his father's death. I felt a surge of anger, but managed to keep my voice steady. "Who are you to say that? Ask your real family for that. After all, we're just a family for show, right?" "I don't owe you that much," I retorted, my voice laced with bitterness. Michael's face, usually so composed, faltered for a moment. "What are you talking about, Laura?" "Oh, nothing," I replied, a cold smile playing on my lips. "Just a bit of a reality check. I know all about your secrets, Michael." His eyes widened slightly, and I could see a hint of panic flickering in them. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, one that I savored. "Everything Dad left behind will be inherited by me, his son," Michael said, his voice betraying a hint of desperation. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, humorless sound. "Is that what you think? You're about to face a much greater hell, Michael." The truth about Michael's secret life was about to unravel, and with it, the facade of our marriage. I knew that the coming days would be tumultuous, but I was ready to see Michael get what he deserved. As we left the cemetery, I took one last look at Charles's grave. He had been the only person in Michael's family who had shown me genuine kindness. And for his sake, if nothing else, I was determined to see this through to the end. The past few years with Michael flashed before my eyes as I sat in our quiet, almost desolate living room. I remembered the hesitant joy I felt when we decided to marry. I was 25 then, young and perhaps a bit naive. Moving in with his parents, Charles and Evelyn, seemed like a daunting step, but their warmth made it easier. I had quit my job at 28, hoping to start a family and support Charles, whose health was declining. Life had a semblance of normalcy then, with the occasional laughter and the routine challenges of a young wife. But the signs were there, subtle at first, like the ripples before a storm. Michael's late nights at work, the weekend trips he claimed were for business, and the ever-growing distance between us. One night, as Michael slept, his phone buzzed incessantly. Driven by a suspicion I couldn't shake off, I checked it. The texts were from a woman named Sophia, filled with intimate words and plans for their next rendezvous. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and sorrow flooding through me. The next morning, over breakfast, I decided to confront him. "Michael, who's Sophia?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. He choked on his coffee, coughing. "What? Who's Sophia?" "Don't play dumb. I saw the messages. Who is she?" I pressed, my voice rising. Michael's face hardened. "It's nothing. Just work stuff. You're being paranoid." I slammed my hand on the table, causing our son Alex to look up from his cereal. "Don't lie to me, Michael. I read the messages. They were anything but work stuff." He glared at me, his eyes cold. "You had no right to go through my phone. That's a violation of my privacy." "Privacy? Is that what you call cheating on your wife?" I spat back, feeling a bitter taste in my mouth. Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to explain myself to you. You're just a housewife. What would you know? I felt a sting at his words, but I held my ground. A housewife who's been keeping your home, raising your son while you gallivant around with some mistress. I deserve better than this, Michael. He snorted. You deserve better? You're lucky to have me. Without me, you're nothing. His words cut deep, but they also ignited a fire within me. I knew then that our marriage was beyond salvaging. It was time for Michael to face the consequences of his actions. The tension in the house was palpable after the breakfast confrontation. Michael had left in a huff, and I was left to ponder my next move. It was clear that our marriage was a sham, a facade that I could no longer maintain. The evidence of Michael's affair was not just a betrayal, it was the catalyst for a much-needed change. I decided to take action, starting with a call to Evelyn, who had always been more of a mother to me than a mother-in-law. Evelyn, we need to talk. It's about Michael, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. What's wrong, dear? Evelyn's voice was laced with concern. It's Michael. He's having an affair, I said bluntly, the words tasting bitter. There was a pause on the other end, a heavy silence that spoke volumes. I had my suspicions, but I didn't want to believe it. Evelyn finally replied, her voice tinged with sadness. We agreed to meet in person to discuss everything. I knew this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. Later that day, Michael returned home, his demeanor one of forced nonchalance. So, have you calmed down now? He asked, a mocking tone in his voice. I looked at him, my resolve hardening. Calm? No, Michael. I'm far from calm. I've decided what to do next. And what's that? He asked, a smirk playing on his lips. I want a divorce, Michael. I can't be part of this lie anymore, I stated, my voice unwavering. Michael's smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of disbelief. Divorce? You think you can just decide that on your own? It's not just my decision. Your actions made it inevitable, I countered. He laughed, a cold, harsh sound. You think you can survive without me? You're nothing but a housewife, Laura. You have no idea how the world works. That may be, but I'd rather face the world alone than live another day in this sham of a marriage. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are, I retorted, the words fueled by years of pent-up frustration and hurt. Michael's face turned red with anger. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I would. And I will, I said, a sense of empowerment rising within me. This was the tipping point, the moment when the facade crumbled and the battle lines were drawn. I was ready to fight for my dignity, for my son's future. Michael had underestimated me for far too long. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. In the days following my declaration, the house became a battleground of icy silences and sharp exchanges. Michael's arrogance was palpable, but I was undeterred. Armed with the evidence of his infidelity, I started to plan my next moves. Evelyn was my rock during this time. She, too, was disillusioned with her son's actions. I never raised him to be this way, she confessed during one of our many late-night talks. Charles would have been devastated to see what Michael has become. I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. We'll get through this, Evelyn. We'll make sure he doesn't get away with it. My first step was to meet with the lawyer Charles had introduced me to years ago. He was an old family friend and was appalled by Michael's behavior. We'll make sure he pays for this, he assured me, his eyes steely. We started by cutting Michael off from Charles's inheritance. The will was clear, and with Charles's recent amendments, Michael's entitlement was reduced to a pittance. This hit him hard. He had always assumed he would inherit a significant sum, and the reality of his situation was a bitter pill to swallow. The news of his affair and his subsequent disinheritance spread like wildfire. I made sure of it. His reputation, both within our social circles and at his workplace, began to crumble. The smug, confident man I had married was now a shadow of his former self, his arrogance replaced by a desperate, almost pitiable, need to salvage his image. But I didn't stop there. You won't get a penny in alimony, I told him during one of our confrontations, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. Michael's response was a mix of anger and disbelief. You can't do this to me. I'm your husband. You were my husband, I corrected him coldly. Now, you're just a man who betrayed his family. Evelyn supported me every step of the way. We became a united front against Michael, a team determined to see justice served. And as the legal proceedings began, it became clear that Michael was fighting a losing battle. His attempts to turn the tide were feeble and easily countered. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his pleas fell on deaf ears. He was a man undone, his actions catching up to him in the most spectacular of ways. As I watched him flounder, a part of me felt vindicated. This was the karma he deserved. But there was no joy in it, only a deep sense of sorrow for what could have been and a determination to build a better future for Alex and myself. The finality of the divorce proceedings brought a sense of closure, yet the aftermath was anything but simple. Michael, stripped of his inheritance and his dignity, was a mere shadow of the man he once was. His downfall was not just legal and financial, it was a total collapse of the facade he had built around himself. Evelyn and I watched as Michael's world unraveled. He had lost his job, a consequence of the scandal and his tarnished reputation. His once lavish lifestyle was now a distant memory, replaced by mounting debts and a stark reality that he had never prepared for. One evening, as I sat with Evelyn in the living room, a sense of peace settled over me. "We did it, Evelyn. We showed him he couldn't just walk over us," I said, a small smile on my lips. Evelyn nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and strength. "Yes, we did. Charles would have been proud of you, Laura. You stood up for yourself and Alex." Speaking of Michael, she continued, "I never imagined my own son would end up like this. But he made his choices, and now he has to live with them." Michael's attempts to cling to his old life were futile. He moved in with his mistress, but their relationship was strained, built on lies and false promises. The news of their struggles reached us through the grapevine, tales of arguments and an impending eviction due to unpaid rent. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life with Alex. He was my priority, my beacon of hope in the midst of the chaos that had engulfed our lives. I found a part-time job, a modest but honest way to contribute to our household and provide for my son. Evelyn was a constant source of support, her wisdom and experience guiding me through the toughest of times. Together, we created a new normal, one where the pain of the past was a memory, not a daily burden. One day I received a call from Michael's mistress. Her voice was laced with desperation. "Laura, please, can you help us? Michael, he's lost everything. We have nothing." I listened, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, but Michael's choices led you both here. I have to think about my son now." Hanging up, I realized how far I had come. The Laura who had once feared confrontation was now a woman who stood her ground, who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. As I looked at Alex playing in the garden, a sense of hope filled me. We had weathered the storm, and now it was time to look forward to brighter days. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it, armed with the strength and resilience I had discovered within myself.